There's a shift happening across residential and commercial real estate right now that most agents can feel, but they can't quite name. And it's not the shift that you would expect. It's not about market conditions, not about interest rates, it's not about inventory. It's about a growing split in who actually understands what artificial intelligence has already changed in how buyers and sellers behave, and who is still operating like it's 2019. Some agents in this business are pulling so far ahead right now that their competition isn't even other agents anymore. It's the buyer's own research. Other agents are falling behind at a pace they don't even realize, because the tools that would show them the gap are the same tools they haven't touched yet. This isn't a story about a handful of superstar producers doing something flashy for attention. It's a story about a line that's forming in this industry. And depending on which side of this line you're standing on, the next few years will either make you or quietly erase you. So before anything else, I want you to ask yourself one honest question as you listen to me speak. Do you actually know, with real numbers, where you stand on that line right now? Not a feeling, not a guess, but an actual answer. Most agents can't answer that, and that inability itself is the first sign of exactly which side of the gap they happen to be on. Here's what ahead actually looks like in practice, stripped of all the hype. Now, an agent who is ahead right now has a system. It's not a habit, and the system is to respond to every single inbound lead within minutes, at any hour, any day, holiday, after hours, middle of the night, when you're eating lunch, when you're at another appointment. And without that response, depending on whether they personally saw their phone light up, it gets responded to. That's that first marker, and it's the least glamorous one, which is exactly why most agents skip it or don't pay attention to it. The agents who are ahead have built or adopted a structure. And in our world, that structure runs through something like Honor Elevate, where a new lead doesn't just get a text back, it gets nurtured, tracked, automations, workflows, triggers, and followed up with a cadence a human alone would never be able to sustain across a full pipeline. The second marker of ahead is speed of information. An agent who is ahead can pull together a real defensible, comparable market analysis in minutes instead of hours, because they let AI handle the compilation so their own time goes into judgment negotiation instead of the spreadsheet work. Now, the third marker is a little bit more subtle, and it's the one that separates the merely competent from the genuinely dangerous competitors in this business. These are agents who are ahead. They treat every buyer conversation as if that buyer has already done more research before the call than most agents used to do in a week. Now, because in 2026, that's usually true. They walk into showings, calls, negotiations, already assuming that the buyer has run their own numbers, checked comparable sales, and maybe even had an AI tool draft questions for them. Being ahead means matching that buyer's level of preparation and then exceeding it, not being caught flat-footed by it. Now, here's what behind actually looks like, and I want to be more precise here because this is where most agents actually live without realizing it themselves. Behind doesn't mean an agent who refuses to use AI because they're being stubborn. It's rarer than that, and more dangerous, because it's mostly invisible from the inside. Because behind looks like an agent who still manually copies information between 3 or 4 different systems, who still writes every follow-up message from scratch, who still, lets leads go quiet for days. There's no structure catching them when the agent gets busy. Behind looks like showing up to a listing appointment or a buyer consultation having done only a fraction of the preparation the other side has already done on their own, and not realizing it until the questions start coming in and there's this visible gap in the room and that uncomfortable feeling where you don't really have an answer to all these questions being thrown at you by having stemmed from an entity more intelligent than all of us. Now, there's a story that circulated publicly not long ago about a very well-known top producing agent, Ryan Serhant. Whether you like him or you don't like him, he's in the business and he's doing quite well. He came within a hair of losing a $50 million deal because the buyer side had quietly done independent research and due diligence that outpaced what the agent's team had prepared. I'm not telling you this story to hold him up as an example to follow or to sell you on anything about him. I'm telling you that story because a deal at that level with that much money and that much professional infrastructure behind it, can get lost to a preparation gap. That's the same gap that's sitting quietly inside far smaller deals, happening every single day, and most agents will never even know it cost them the deal. That's the real danger of being behind. It doesn't announce itself, it just shows up at a listing who went to someone else, a buyer who went quiet, a deal that fell through for reasons that never gets explained. So let's talk about the money, because that's where the gap stops being theoretical. The agents pulling ahead aren't just saving time. They're capturing a disproportionate and growing share of the transactions happening in their markets, while a much larger group of agents fight over a shrinking slice of what's left. This is what people mean when they describe the industry becoming K-shaped. One small group rising sharply and a much larger group sliding down a slower, steadier decline. Now, the agents on the rising side aren't necessarily smarter or more talented than everybody else. In a lot of cases, they're just the ones who treated their business like something to systematize, instead of something to grind through on personality and hustle alone. The agents on the declining side are often good agents, hardworking agents, agents who genuinely care about their clients, who simply never close the gap, what AI can now do for a real estate business and what they are actually letting it do. That's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. It's not about talent, it's about whether you built the systems that match how buyers and sellers actually behave now. So what actually closes the gap? Because that's the only part of this that matters if you're being honest with yourself about where you potentially stand. Now, it starts with an honest audit of your own pipeline, not a general one, but a real honest-to-God audit. How fast do you actually respond to a new lead? On average, at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, not on your best day. How many leads have gone quiet in the last 90 days without a single follow-up touch? How many of your week is spent on tasks that have nothing to do with actual negotiation, relationship building, or closing? Most agents have never run that audit on themselves because it's uncomfortable and because of what they might find. And it's so irritating when you go to Instagram and start looking at a channel that you haven't looked at, some response, and a client from way back in the day has reached out 2 months ago, said, "Hey, are you still selling real estate? Paul and I are thinking about selling our house." 2 months later, that ship has sailed. You can blame them for not calling your cell. You still have them in your cell, but you missed the point. People are communicating in all these channels, and if you don't have something watching or you yourself aren't doing it, it doesn't happen. So closing that gap means building a real follow-up system that doesn't rely on your memory or your willpower, one that runs whether you're at your desk or your kid's soccer game, the same way Honor Elevate is built to do inside of our own process. Now, closing that gap means letting AI carry the research and preparation load, market data, comparable analysis, buyer background, so that the time you spend face-to-face, you can actually do, reading the room, negotiating, building trust. Closing that gap means accepting that the old model of relationship-only real estate, where charm and hustle alone used to carry a career, it's not gone, but it's no longer sufficient on its own. It has to be paired with an infrastructure now, or it gets outcompeted by agents who have both. Now, here's the part most people miss in conversations like this. This isn't really an AI story, it's an accountability story. The agents who are ahead aren't ahead because they found some secret tool, some amazing AI system. They're ahead because they built a process that actually holds themselves to, and they let data show them the truth about their own business instead of hiding from it. The agents who are behind aren't behind because they're incapable. They're behind because nobody's ever forced them to look directly at their own numbers, their own response times, and their own follow-up gaps with real accountability attached to what they see. That distinction matters more than any specific piece of software because tools change every year, every day, sometimes hourly. But a business built on honest measurement and real follow-through, they'd never go out of style. Now, if you've listened this far, you're being honest with yourself, some part of this, and you already knows which side of the line you're standing on. Because you know your response times are slower than you'd like to admit. Because you know deals have quietly slipped away and you never fully understood why. Maybe because you're doing well right now and the uneasy feeling isn't about today, it's about whether what's working for you today still works in 18 months while the gap keeps widening around you. That feeling is worth paying attention to. because it's usually more accurate than the story we tell ourselves about our own business. Everything you just heard came from real research, digging through what's actually happening across the industry right now, not from theory, but using AI systems I built for myself specifically to pull the real patterns out of what's working and what isn't. That's the whole point of doing it this way, so that what gets said here is accountable to what's actually true, not just what sounds good. If you got through all of this and you're still not sure exactly where you are, well, hit me up at connorwithhonor.com, and I'm more than happy to help you with your AI adoption. Be well. See you in the next one.